While it is quite easy to get under someone's skin, it is an entirely different ballgame to piss an entire country off. Since its birth in the late 1940s, rock and roll has managed to appeal to fans and enrage some others in the same vein. I mean, what's not to love about loud guitars and singers screaming about breaking the law? Over the years, some of the biggest rock bands have been banned and restricted from different countries. The reasons for these bans range from weird actions like using a country's flag as a wet wipe to something as ridiculous as long hair. Count down with me as I take a look at 20 rock bands that have either gotten themselves or their songs banned in countries. Look out for your faves. Bon Jovi. The American rock band came into the scene in the early 1980s and had John Bon Jovi, Richie Sambora, Tico Torres, and David Bryan in the band. Becoming musical icons gave them a touring schedule, and they performed in over 50 countries. In 2010, during a tour in Taiwan, they projected images of the Dalai Lama, the exiled Tibetan spiritual leader, on the backdrop of their stage. The reason behind this was to preach the message of peace, which worked for many around the world except the Chinese government. You see, the Dalai Lama represents a character in a complex and sensitive issue. Fast forward to 2015, Bon Jovi was planning a concert in China, but it was not meant to be. The Chinese government, in an effort to find out more about Bon Jovi, found out about the stunt they pulled in 2010, and they weren't happy. The Chinese government maintains strict control over their cultural events, especially those with foreign individuals involved. Bon Jovi's association with the Dalai Lama, however indirect, was seen as a political statement, and the Chinese government was not willing to overlook it. They placed a ban on Bon Jovi and immediately cancelled their concert. That's not the only rock band the Chinese government has added to their black book. Linkin Park. Linkin Park already had a relationship with China. They had a concert in Shanghai in 2007 and another in Shanghai and Macau in 2009. The troubles began when the band met with the Dalai Lama at a Music for Relief event in Los Angeles that same year. When the band wanted to come back to China in 2011 for 3 stadium shows in Beijing, Shanghai, and Wuhan, the Chinese government refused and cancelled the contracts before the shows could be announced. There are rumors that the band was also banned indefinitely from performing in China. Still, in 2015, fans of the band eagerly waited to get a taste of the exciting experience of the Hunting Party Tour. This was expected to be their first stadium tour in the country, with 5 shows scheduled from the 17th to the 26th of July. However, the strict conditions were unlike any Linkin Park had encountered before. They were required to submit their set list for government pre-approval. The list included 42 songs, with some songs like Given Up, Remember the Name, Welcome, and Bleed It Out going through lyrical changes. The shows continued after the band met the conditions, and much to the disappointment of the Chinese government, they were still successful. Moving on to another China band, rock band, Metallica. Metallica's lyrics are often linked with themes of power, corruption, and personal struggle, which fans around the world can relate to. In 2013, the stage was set for Metallica to perform in China for the very first time. China, known for its strict censorship laws, caused a unique challenge to the band. The government wanted a close examination of Metallica's songs and their lyrics. The band now faced a difficult choice: not to bend in their artistic integrity or bend enough to be able to connect with their fans in their country. They chose the realistic and rebellious path. Rather than cancel the shows and disappoint their fans, Metallica chose to stick to the restrictions and focus on enjoying the experience with their fans. James Hetfield on The Howard Stern Show had this to say: "Whatever rules they set down, the fans were there to have fun. We got our foot in the door, we were able to go and play in China. That was the key." In a clever hack, lead guitarist Kirk Hammett took to the stage during his solo performance and played the unmistakable riffs of the band's songs. Besides placing restrictions on rock bands, China has also placed bans on certain rock albums. Guns N' Roses. With Guns N' Roses' raw sound and unapologetic lyrics, they've carved out a legacy for themselves, but now they've hit the wall of censorship. In 2008, the band's long-awaited album, Chinese Democracy, found itself on the wrong side of the Great Wall, banned by the Chinese government. The album's title, Chinese Democracy, was a bold choice, hinting at political undertones. One could see from the title that the album would not just be a collection of songs, but a statement. The release of Chinese Democracy was met with a fast and decisive reaction from the Chinese government. The title alone was enough to raise the eyebrows of the authorities, but it was the content within that sealed the album's fate within the nation's borders. The Chinese government deemed the album inappropriate for the public, stating its potential to disturb the social order and challenge the political status quo. Despite the shock from the ban, it wasn't entirely unexpected. China China's strict censorship laws for Western artists have long been an issue, and Guns N' Roses only joined the list of those silenced by the state. While China loves placing bands, in another part of the world, a rock band is wanted for crimes against music. Nickelback. Nickelback was formed in 1995, and since the year they were formed, they have been banned, used as a weapon, and used as the punchline to a joke that was funny in many countries. In 2006, a petition was made to prevent Nickelback from performing at the AFL Grand Final, one of Australia's most watched sporting events. The petition gathered considerable attention and showed that Nickelback's music was not Australia's favourite. Although the petition did not succeed in its goal, it was a clear message of resistance. During their 2015 tour of Australia, the Queensland Police Department made a wanted poster that could have been from a Wild West film and declared Nickelback wanted. The poster, complete with sketches of the band members, warned the public of individuals impersonating musicians. You would think that would be all. Not at all. In 2017, a US Army officer issued an outright ban on playing Nickelback's records at their command post. With all the rigorous training they go through, it's obvious that listening to Nickelback's songs is worse than that. Moving on to a band that was banned in another Asian country, the Rolling Stones. As the Rolling Stones rose to fame, so did their need for living on the edge. The band's adventures, both on and off stage, cemented their image as the bad boys of rock music. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Japan remained deeply rooted in tradition and societal order. The Japanese government, wary of Western influences that could disrupt their societal fabric, kept a watchful eye. It was within this context that the Rolling Stones planned to bring their tour to Japan. The Stones touring party was set to be an unforgettable event, one that would bring the band's notorious live performances to a Japanese audience for the first time. The Japanese government was not thrilled, and they didn't want the Stones, with their unpleasant history, to influence their youth, so they took a stand. The band received a ban from the Japanese government, and the Stones touring party immediately paused. The reason given was Mick Jagger's drug convictions. The government just didn't want him in their country. In February of 1990, nearly 2 decades after the first ban, the Rolling Stones finally took to the stage in Tokyo, delivering a performance that was more than a celebration. Next on my list is a band you'd least expect to get banned, the Beatles. The Beatles are made up of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. When they became famous, they greatly influenced their fans and their way of life. Not everyone was pleased by this power. In 1965, an Israeli businessman saw an opportunity to bring them to Tel Aviv, but behind closed doors, a government committee was set up. The committee members looked through reports of the Beatles and their concert effects on youth. With these reports, the Beatles were banned from performing in Israel. In 2018, though, the Israeli ambassador to Britain issued an official apology for the ban. Away from Israel, in 1966, the Beatles were also set to perform in Manila, but an innocent mistake would get them another ban. Imelda Marcos, the First Lady, known for her love of the arts and her desire to associate with celebrities, had planned a breakfast reception in honor of the Beatles. Invitations were sent out, and the event was widely publicized as a highlight of the band's visit. The Beatles, unaware of this, didn't honor the invitation and internationally embarrassed the First Lady. The missed reception set off a chain reaction that led to an unofficial ban of the Beatles in the Philippines. If you think that's interesting, here's a band that was banned because of their name, Lamb of God. Lamb of God emerged from the ashes of a previous band known as Burn the Priest. It was formed in the late 1990s in Richmond, Virginia. As Lamb of God's influence grew, their music spread across the globe, reaching fans in the far corners of the earth. One of the places was Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Lamb of God was planning a concert here. The issue with that was that the band's music had an aggressive tone and provocative lyrics, which could be perceived as a threat to the religious and cultural sensibilities of the nation. Malaysia is an Islamic state, and the government, in its efforts to maintain harmony among its people, often takes a conservative position on matters that could potentially disturb the peace. This includes a vigilant approach to safeguarding Islamic values, which are held in high esteem by the majority Malay Muslim population. Concerns were raised about the band's potential to lead Muslims astray. The blending of heavy metal music with portions from the Quran, as some believed Lamb of God had done, was seen as an act of blasphemy. The permission for the concert was denied, effectively banning the band from taking the stage. Next up is the band that received restrictions from more than 2 countries for their lyrics and artwork, Cannibal Corpse. Where do I begin with this band? In 1996, Australia stopped the sale of any of the rock band's merch for a decade because of their graphic content. Then, in 2006, Germany banned the sale of their first 3 records, including live performances of those songs, also because of graphic content. Fun fact, albums released later on by Cannibal Corpse were just as violent as the previous ones. In fact, only those who are 18 and older can listen to their music. The situation with Russia is way trickier. In 2014, Cannibal Corpse had a tour in the country, and 6 6 out of 8 shows were cancelled because of religious protesters. In addition to that, their music is banned from being translated into the Russian language and from being distributed in the country. Their artwork is banned as well. Each country had an issue with Cannibal Corpse's explicit content, which seemed to give a nod to violence, abuse of people and animals, murder, and suicide. There was also the danger their music and artwork posed to the mental health of children. Considering the image of Cannibal Corpse, it's no surprise that bans and restrictions follow them around. The next band on my list would have you asking, what was the reason? Bloodhound Gang. Most people found the Bloodhound Gang's content offensive. Their live performances were full of wild stunts that left a lasting impression on their audience. In 2013, the band was scheduled to perform at several venues, including the Kubana Festival in Russia. Before they got to Russia, they had a date with their fans in Odessa, Ukraine, and thought it wise to pull an unnecessary stunt. As the band played, Jared Hasselhoff reached for a Russian flag that was on the stage. With a call to the audience not to inform Russian President Vladimir Putin, he proceeded to stuff the flag into the front of his pants and then pull it out from the back. Outrage poured in from all corners, with many Russians viewing the act as a disrespect to their national symbol. Russian Culture Minister Vladimir Medinsky took to Twitter to announce that Bloodhound Gang is packing its bags. These idiots will not perform in Kuban. The band's scheduled performance at the festival was immediately cancelled. In the aftermath, Hasselhoff was questioned by the local police, and the band's future in Russia hung in the balance. Russia saw the stunt as an insult to them and did what any country would do in that situation. Moving away from that, India also has some bands to hand out. Slayer. Slayer was formed in 1981, and the band quickly rose to fame with their aggressive style and controversial themes. By the mid-2000s, they had cemented their place in heavy metal history. However, it was their album Christ Illusion, released in 2006, that would become one of their most controversial works. The cover art for the album is a disturbing and provocative image that depicts Christ with a missing eye and amputated arms, set against a backdrop of chaos and destruction. The tracks in the album also provoked strong reactions. Two of the most controversial tracks on the album are Skeleton Christ and Jihad. The lyrics of these songs were direct insults to Christianity, Islamic extremism, and the September 11th attacks. The global reception had its share of backlash. In the United States, the album's cover art was changed for its release in certain stores. In Germany, the album faced scrutiny, and there were calls for it to be banned due to its provocative content. In India as well, all copies of Christ Illusion were pulled from shelves with no plans to reissue the album in any form, thereby placing a ban on the album. Circling back to China and their Black Book, here's another band on their list, Aerosmith. The anticipation for Aerosmith's scheduled concerts in Shanghai and Taipei was over the roof. The fact that Aerosmith had never performed in Shanghai or Taipei made the upcoming concerts historic moments for both the band and their fans. The first signs of trouble showed days before the concert in Shanghai. The local promoters responsible for organizing the events were reportedly struggling to meet their contractual obligations. While the specifics of these obligations were not publicly disclosed, it became clear that significant issues needed to be addressed. 2 days before the Shanghai concert, Aerosmith made the announcement that both the Shanghai and Taipei concerts had to be cancelled. Frontman Steven Tyler had this to say, "We are extremely upset to have disappointed our dedicated fans. They have welcomed us into their country, and due to uncontrollable circumstances, we will not be able to perform. We were so excited to share our music with them and look forward to one day returning and giving them the show they deserve." While the reason for the cancellation was unknown, rumors flew that it had something to do with counterculture and drug references in their lyrics. Whether that was the reason or not, we may never know. Moving on to the next band on my list, Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper's live performances were legendary. Their stage presence featured dark makeup, wild costumes, fearful antics, and captivated audiences. Alice Cooper's music and performances challenged societal norms and pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in rock music. It was this that led to their ban from Australia in 1975. Australia's Labour and Immigration Minister was concerned about the potential influence on the country's youth. He declared, "I am not going to allow a degenerate who could powerfully influence the young and weak-minded to enter this country and stage this sort of exhibition here," and so a ban was slapped on them. Despite the ban, Alice Cooper's popularity continued to grow. Their albums sold millions of copies worldwide, even in Australia. Alice Cooper, on the other hand, expressed disbelief that their performances could be seen as a genuine threat to society. They argued that their shows were meant to entertain and provoke thought, not to corrupt young minds. The ban, they claimed, was an overreaction fueled by fear and misunderstanding. Next up, here's a band that was banned in the US, one of the most important markets in the world. It makes one wonder what they did wrong. The Kinks. In 1965, the Kinks faced a 4-year ban from touring in the United States. What did they do wrong? Well, you're about to find out. In the 1960s, the Kinks, along with other rock bands, took the world by storm. As the Kinks' popularity grew, so did their ambitions. They set their sights on the American market, which was crucial for any band aiming for international success. They embarked on their first American tour in 1965, but from the very beginning, the tour experienced many troubles. The band's rebellious nature and wild behavior quickly became a liability in the more conservative American music scene. The tour started off on a rocky note, with several cancelled dates. The reasons for these varied but often involved the band's excessive drinking, which led to missed performances and unstable behavior that frustrated promoters and venue owners. One of the incidents occurred during their scheduled performance on the popular variety program Where the Action Is. The Kinks showed up late, and while a staff member was criticizing them, Ray Davies proceeded to punch the staff member. The American Federation of Musicians saw the Kinks' behavior as a blatant violation of their standards, and the union handed them a 4-year ban from touring in the United States. Most of the bans on my list are justified, but what about this band that was banned for some silly reason? Led Zeppelin. In 1972, Led Zeppelin was famous for their electrifying performances and iconic long hair. While it didn't matter in most countries, Singapore begged to differ. Singapore, in the 1960s and 1970s, was in the middle of a rapid transformation. They were emerging from a colonial past and were trying to establish a strong national identity and maintain social order. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, the government implemented a series of strict regulations aimed at shaping the behavior and appearance of its citizens. One of the most controversial measures was the ban on long hair for men. Imagine the shock they faced when the band members Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham were informed that they would not be allowed to leave their private jet because of their long hair. The authorities were serious, and the band had no choice but to turn around and head back to England without stepping foot in Singapore. Getting banned from a country is one thing, but getting arrested, deported, and then banned is just another level entirely. Behemoth. Over the years, Behemoth has released several critically acclaimed albums, including their most recent, The Satanist. However, their controversial image and outspoken views have also made them a target for censorship and bans in various countries. Russia, with its conservative government and strict laws on religious expression, was a particularly challenging environment for Behemoth. Despite these challenges, the band had a strong following in the country and embarked on a tour in May 2014. Their initial encounters with Russian authorities were tense, as the band's provocative themes and outspoken criticism of political leaders did not sit well with the government. On the day of their scheduled concert in Yekaterinburg, Adam Nergal took to social media with alarming news. The band had been detained by Russian immigration services. According to Nergal, the authorities claimed that Behemoth was traveling with incorrect paperwork and specifically lacked the necessary work visas to perform in Russia. The situation got worse, leading to the band receiving a fine of $242.32 in total and an order for them to leave Russia immediately. This raised questions about the true motives behind the authorities' actions. The official reason given for their detainment was that the band had obtained the wrong visas to perform in the country, and they were banned from performing in Russia for 5 years. The next on my list is a band that was heavily censored, and their fans couldn't recognize themselves: Iron Maiden. In 2013, when Iron Maiden performed in China during their The Book of Souls World Tour, they faced a lot of censorship that stripped away many of their iconic elements. The Chinese Ministry of Culture imposed strict regulations on their performances, banning pyrotechnics, smoke effects, and even Dickinson's flag-waving antics. The band was also restricted from throwing merchandise into the crowd and using strong language, basically changing the essence of their live shows. The band's reaction to these restrictions was one of frustration and disappointment. Bruce Dickinson, in particular, was vocal about the censorship. He expressed his dissatisfaction with the limitations imposed on their performances and promised Chinese fans that he would address the issue. Yet nothing they said or did could change the decision of the Chinese government. Despite the restrictions, Iron Maiden remained professional and delivered powerful performances, showing their musical ability and dedication to their fans. While their fans were thrilled to see Iron Maiden perform in China for the first time, the heavy censorship left many feeling cheated. The absence of the band's iconic elements made the concerts feel less authentic, and fans couldn't help but compare the controlled shows to the uncensored performances they had seen or heard about from other parts of the world. Up next is a band whose sin from the last decade came back to haunt them: Oasis. In 2009, Oasis was planning a tour that included dates in China. This was a significant milestone for the band, as it marked their first ever concert in the country. However, the excitement was short-lived because the Chinese government cancelled the shows days before the concerts and banned Oasis from performing in the country. The reason behind this drastic decision was Noel Gallagher's involvement in a Free Tibet benefit concert in 1997. The Chinese government's sensitivity to the Tibet issue is well documented. Tibet, an autonomous region in China, has been a main point of international controversy and human rights debates for decades. The Chinese government maintains strict control over the region and suppresses any form of advocacy for Tibetan independence. Organized by the Milarepa Fund, the concert aimed to raise awareness about the Chinese government's human rights abuses in Tibet and to support the Tibetan freedom movement. Noel Gallagher's participation in the Free Tibet benefit concert in New York City did not go unnoticed by the Chinese authorities, although they were quiet about it until they needed to take a stand. Moving on to another band that was barred from playing in China, Cradle of Filth. Cradle of Filth is no stranger to pushing societal norms and challenging religious and cultural taboos. Their album covers, merchandise and music videos often feature explicit and provocative imagery, which has led to numerous bans and censorship attempts over the years. The band has always maintained that their intention is not to offend, but to provoke thought and challenge the status quo. In China, before any international act can take the stage, they must submit their set lists and lyrics to the cultural section for review. The content must align with the country's cultural and political standards before it can be performed. In some cases, entire performances have been cancelled if the content is considered too controversial. In 2013, Cradle of Filth announced their tour, which included a highly anticipated gig in Shanghai. Given Cradle of Filth's history of provocative content, the review process was bound to be intense. The verdict was in, and the Chinese authorities deemed Cradle of Filth's music unsuitable for their audience. No specific reasons were provided, but it was clear that the band's provocative content was too much for the censors to overlook. As a result, Cradle of Filth was forbidden from performing in China. And finally on my list, a band that got restricted for encouraging unprotected sex, Rammstein. Rammstein's journey began in 1994 in Berlin, Germany, when 6 musicians came together to form a band. Their debut album, Herzeleid, released in 1995, laid the foundation for their distinctive sound and provocative style. By the time their third album, Mutter, was released in 2001, Rammstein had firmly established themselves as one of the most provocative and influential bands in the world. Their live performances often featured explicit content, including simulated sex acts and graphic imagery. In 2009, Rammstein's album Liebe ist für alle da, which translates to Love is there for everybody, began to unfold. The lead single on the album was accompanied by a music video that featured graphic sexual scenes. Authorities in Germany quickly took notice and claimed that the song encouraged unprotected sex despite the risk of AIDS, which they argued was harmful to young listeners. In November 2009, Rammstein's album was officially banned from being advertised or displayed openly in a manner that is accessible to those under the age of 18. While some bands were banned for innocent mistakes or things beyond their control, others got banned because the saying, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do," was merely a suggestion and not words to live by. Click on the videos on your screen to enjoy more.